Then you may want to sort of take a day trip or two around Moscow to visit some of the battlefields. And obviously the main battlefield that you would want to visit is that of Borodino. Now, I should probably say a few words about how to get to Borodino because it's by no means straightforward. So there is a Borodino train station, but from the Borodino train station itself, it's to the southern end of the battlefield. There is a bus, which is an hourly bus. You can probably indicate to get off whenever it goes through a part of the battlefield which you like the look of. And it does stop at the museum. Just be aware of what these things look like. And we will show you photos. So.
We will.
So the other alternative is to go to Mozhaisk, about 10 kilometers or so to the east of the battlefield. And there you will be able to get a faster train there, although you have to be quite early. And you would also, and once you get there, you will have taxi services. So you'll be able to get a taxi from Mozhaisk. That's how to get to Borodino. There are kind of three main areas to the Borodino battlefield. So we will start off with the center and the main battlefield museum, because certainly if you're only planning to be around Borodino for like 3 or 4 hours, then that's where you should be. You should be at the museum and at the main monument. So the museum itself is not terribly big. I mean, it will probably take you about 25-30 minutes to go around. I think the pièce de résistance of the museum is the diorama and also the 3D map. And the diorama is interactive. As far as I'm aware, you only get commentary in Russian, but they may have English commentary as well if you ask for it. Mm-hmm. And
well, I love dioramas. There should always be dioramas in military museums.
And yeah, as part of that, you also have displays of archaeological finds from the battlefield, including like bullets and cannonballs.
The usual fare you get in battlefields: buttons, buckles,
yeah,
odd bayonet, hat plates.
By the ceiling, you have portraits of the senior Russian generals, as well as flags and standards. And we now go on to the main monument on the Raevsky Redoubt, which is literally just across the road from the Battlefield Museum. And that monument was built in 1839. It's a very imposing, I don't know what to call it, like it's a sort of column obelisk type thing, crowned with a sort of rather
diode onion ball.
Yes. A prickly onion ball.
Yeah.
Which I think is supposed to like represent the sun or something. And
it's I don't think it can have a name in architecture what it is. It's
yeah, but it's very impressive. Along the sides you have the casualty figures for, I believe, both the Russians and the French, and it's quite interesting because in 1839, when it was built, that was also when the grave or the remains of Prince Bagration were transferred from where he died in Sima and Vladimir province to the Borodino battlefield and placed at the foot of the main battlefield monument.
Obviously, from the that's the Raevsky Redoubt, you would be able to have a fairly good look around. I would imagine.
Yeah. Some of the other monuments in this sector of the battlefield, one which I find particularly interesting is the Chevalier Guard regiments, which is around 500 meters, perhaps more, southeast of the redoubt. Can't remember whether there's a direct path to it, but that's where the massive cavalry engagement took place near the end of the battle, where the Russian cavalry really
saved the day and
destroyed
the French cavalry.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting monument. It has it's a sort of eagle with a standard, and it's on a plinth. And
so the Horse Guards monument specifically, it's called.
It's called. I mean, it's. I mean, this is the thing, because I believe there are two regiments in the Russian army, which are which, when translated into English, essentially mean horse guards.
Okay.
But because I think there's like a Chevalier Guard regiment and also a Konno-Gwardyjski regiment. I think they were both present in this charge.
That's Imperial Guards for you, isn't it? It's like...
Indeed. Especially in Russia. We now move on to Borodino village, which is maybe 15-20 minutes north, if you're walking from the main museum. And there you will see a palace which was built later, essentially to accommodate Tsars who were visiting the battlefield. So it was called a traveling palace, which is where the Tsar may stay. The exhibition inside is more to do with the local area and the sort of history of Borodino village itself, and also its connection with Denis Davidov, the partisan commander who spent his youth at the estate.
So if you can spot Davidov,
yes.
Let us know.
Yeah, one of the artifacts is part of the uniform of General Bagration, which he had been buried in, and his grave was destroyed by the Nazis in the Second World War, as we mentioned in the previous video, and they could only recover some fragments, and that included this piece of cloth, which was part of his uniform. But just not too far to the north of this is the Church of the Smolensk Mother of God, I believe, and it's a white church. It was there during the battle itself, and I believe that both French and Russians during the battle, initially the Russians, but later the French, because the French took control of Borodino village, would climb on top of the spire, have a look around, and get an idea of what was going on. It's unlikely to be open.
Don't try and climb onto the spire.
No, do not. You will probably have angry Russians. We now move on to the Kutuzov monument, which is sort of built on the Russian army's observation post at Gorky. Now, it's disputed whether this was Kutuzov's headquarters or whether it was the observation post. I think to some extent it's almost the same thing, because during the battle itself, you're not going to be staying in the same place where you stayed the night before necessarily, and I think Kutuzov's headquarters may have been elsewhere, but he would have spent a lot of time at Gorky itself. That features an eagle on top of an obelisk, and the reason for the eagle, as far as I'm aware, is because the day before the battle, when Kutuzov was inspecting the Russian army, an eagle flew over his head and lingered over for some while, and it's considered to be a positive omen for the battle. So that's why, as far as I'm aware, the Kutuzov monument features an eagle.
So it's not an imperial eagle then, because I was assuming it was because it was a.
As far as I'm aware, the eagle has one head.
Okay. Right. Interesting. Right, because that would be yes.
But
and there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you are looking at an eagle in Russian, it has one head. It's probably not an imperial one, because if it was, that would be a French eagle. And that's not something they encourage on monuments.
or indeed a Prussian eagle or a Polish one. None of which are particularly encouraged. But let's now move on to Semyonovskaya. You're going to see a few monuments on the roadsides, and you're going to see the Bagration's command post, which is kind of a square sort of platform, maybe a circle platform, which is sort of fenced off as, and that is where Bagration was, at least initially during the Battle of Borodino, and it's also where Franz Roubaud was when he painted the Borodino panorama. So that's where you're seeing the Borodino panorama from. And to go a bit further south from that, you will initially see a rather large black monument, which was the main monument built in 1912 for the centenary, so there's the main centennial monument. But a bit further along, and now you're sort of going towards the west, you will be able to see the Spaso-Borodinsky Monastery, and this was built in and around the 1830s as the result of the labors of Margarita Tuchkova, who was the widow of General Alexander Tuchkov, who had died during the battle, and his body was not found, but witnesses generally agree where he fell. So it was built on that site. Initially, it was a wooden chapel, and then it became a stone building or brick building. And since then, it has developed into a fully fledged monastery, which I believe is still active. There are several buildings in which you can visit for a small fee into each one. And one of the most interesting is perhaps not part of the, it's quite close to the monastery, but not within its walls, and that is the house in which Tolstoy stayed for 6 months in order to do his research on the Borodino battlefield. If you go a bit further beyond the monastery, you will see the one of the flèches, which is the one on the left, and that is where Dmitry Neverovsky's 27th Division fought, and that is also where the 27th Division monument is, and where in 1912 Neverovsky's remains were brought and reinterred on a grave just behind the monument. And you're also going to see from the flèche itself, from the crest of the flèche, you'll be able to see several other monuments to other divisions and units which fought in the battle, including the pioneers who were responsible for fortifying. We now go back towards the main road, the main sort of north-south road, and that is where you will see to your right, actually not too far away from the main memorial in 1912, the monument to the 4th Cavalry Corps. And this was the this was the Cavalry Corps which was part of the Second Army, so it was supporting Bagration, and therefore it had a quite large role to play in the early stages of the battle during the counterattacks to retake the flèches. And one of the soldiers who fought in that corps was Nadezhda Durova, who is known as the Cavalry Maiden, also known by her male name as Alexander Alexandrov or Alexander Sokolov, and she served, I believe, as an Ulan as part of this corps, and participated in the Battle of Borodino, and as Josh showed, left behind her memoirs, which describes the.
Yes. It's a little short bit in the book, actually. She talks about how cold her hands were constantly, and how strange and terrifying the battle was, and how we were saying how everybody would have been deaf afterwards. She said her ears were ringing to the point of deafness after the battle, and she was contused by a cannonball, she says. And as we were also talking about the stolidity of the Russians, she didn't count it as a wound, because it did not. A contusion is not an actual. It didn't do anything. It's a bad bruise, essentially. It's a really bad bruise that breaks the skin and vessels underneath the skin and stuff like that. She went back, and she was contused. She felt guilty of absenting herself from the ranks because she didn't count it as a wound, and she rode back to the troops, and someone said, "What are you doing back here?" And she said, "It's not a wound. I'm fine." But she regretted the day afterwards because she was in a lot of pain.
Well, I find myself in a lot of pain once I sort of get on a horse.
Definitely look up that book, because it's very interesting.
Indeed. And just a few other bits of the battlefield to mention, and really, if you're planning to do everything on foot, you're not going to be able to see this.
You may need a horse.
You may need a horse, or indeed some sort of golf cart, or someone to drive you around. Which I'm sure, if you're willing to pay someone, they will be willing to take you around, and that will be quite a fast way to get around. Although not all the monuments are that close to a road. But in any case, so the Shevardino redoubt is obviously the one of the initial position of part of the Russian left flank, which later transferred to the French and became essentially where Napoleon directed the battle from. And where he was during the battle.
That painted him with his feet on a drum.
Yes, that's right. So the Shevardino redoubt itself is there is a monument to, I believe, the 12th Artillery Company, or whatever it's called, and that's on the redoubt itself. Again, you have like stairs going up to the redoubt. Quite a nice view from it, although not a view of where the Russian lines would be, because it would be covered by trees. It is covered by trees, unfortunately. So you may think to yourself, why on earth would Napoleon find himself here to watch the battle? Well, back then there would have been no trees in front of him. Not too far away from the Shevardino redoubt itself is the only monument to the Grande Armée on the Borodino battlefield, and it's a large sort of triangular shape with a French eagle this time on the top. It's probably like about a kilometer away from the Spaso-Borodinsky monastery if you wanted to walk that. We now go to the southern end, so you're heading south from Semyonovskaya, and then on each side of the road you're going to have monuments to the to the Russian infantry regiments who defended that part of the line, including the 3 Guards regiments. You're going to see the Militia Monument, which is, I believe, like in a roundabout, very close to the train station. But if you want to go beyond the train station, then you have the Utitsa Kurgan and 3 monuments there, including one to the Pavlovsk Grenadiers, where you have a depiction of the iconic hat which they wear, which is like
it's an old 7 Years' War
Prussian
type.
Yeah,
with the bronze face or copper face on it.
That's right. So that, I believe, is our tour of the Borodino battlefield. Again, do some extra research on what you want to see. If you want to see everything, you're going to need some sort of vehicle. Or potentially a horse.
If you want to do it as Professor Richard Holmes would have done it, get a horse. And ride around the battlefield, talking very eloquently about about warfare and things. That would be the most interesting way of doing it. Like a Cossack.
Indeed. But now I think we will, because Borodino is not the only 1812 battlefield you can visit close to Moscow.
Tell us more.
There is Maloyaroslavets, which is a couple of hours train ride to the south of Moscow, and it's actually easier to get to because the town of Maloyaroslavets itself is slightly bigger than Borodino, and therefore you can walk from the station to the battlefield. It takes you maybe 15-20 minutes or so. But so the main sites, there aren't actually too many sites in Maloyaroslavets. Again, certainly compared to Borodino on the field itself. But
it was a smaller battle.
It's a smaller battle, but there's some interesting stuff there, including a couple of museums, which are on essentially the main east-west road, which is, I believe, called Kutuzov Street or Ulitsa Kutuzova. I may be wrong on that. The museum to the right is a very modern establishment where you have stuff nicely curated in display cases, and it gives you a story of the 1812 campaign. And then you get to a larger room, sort of near the end, where it shows you the again, there's a sort of 3D map of the battle, and again you have a sort of I'm not sure whether it's interactive, but you have a general idea about what happens during the battle and how the battle unfolds. So that's a pretty nice little museum, even though like Maloyaroslavets is hardly as should we say significant, or it's
true. It doesn't have the reputation of Borodino, and does not have. But weirdly enough, because it was technically a tactical defeat, does not even have the military significance of, say, Vyazma later on.
This is true.
It's a strange battlefield, but it is the place that forced Napoleon away.
So it was actually there's the strategic turning point of the battle, which is why actually in the 2012 bicentenary, when Putin spoke about the 1812 campaign, he actually said, we should be commemorating Maloyaroslavets a lot more rather than Borodino. But I agree with Vladimir. But what you can see in Maloyaroslavets is pretty impressive, and this museum was probably at least renovated or upgraded in 2012, and then a bit further on, you have another, I guess, sort of another museum in a sort of older style, as far as what I can see, because I didn't actually go into that one. But that's so I cannot say much about it. But do know there are 2 battlefield museums at Maloyaroslavets. So if you are really that interested, make sure to visit both. English is not going to be much spoken, so you're going to have to do your best. With Borodino, like, it is popular enough for at least the people at the ticket office to be able to speak English. And with Maloyaroslavets, I believe you can probably get away with saying some words in English. So you'll probably still be fine. But in any case, if you have managed to, or if you are brave enough to do this, then you can go a bit further along, where you will be able to see a sort of large hill, where is the monument to the fallen of the battle, and that is it's essentially built on a mass grave, and it's got an Orthodox cross, and it's got a officer, I believe, in First World War early 1900s uniform, placing some sort of laurel wreath on it, and both sides you've got cannon. It's a fairly sort of it's what you'd expect a Russian monument to be like. And once you've seen that, you can climb back down, and then you go back onto the main road. You go a bit further, and that's where you see a small chapel, which is where the diorama of the battle is now, and it's a very small place where they've installed the diorama in 1987, I believe. And there's it's probably like a 5 to 10 minute commentary about the battle, and you get to see sort of the main sort of areas of interest, such as the St. Nicholas Convent, which we will go into a little later. But if you go even further west, you eventually arrive at the square, the main square, where you will see the main battlefield monument, which was erected in 1844, and it's actually very close in design to that of the Borodino monument. It's slightly smaller. It's not sort of crowned with gold, so it's slightly less imposing, but it's still pretty large. And it's next to the main cathedral there, and slightly beyond the main battlefield monument, you have the church of. I've since read that it's actually the church of the Our Lady of Kazan, and I think it was built after the battle. But in any case, it's an interesting church to go inside. I mean, it's like any sort of Russian Orthodox church in the Russian provinces. But in front of it is a really interesting monument to the Regimental Priest, and this was fairly recent. It's from 2014, and it shows a priest holding a cross in his hand, and the gesture is like he is sort of rushing into the fray, perhaps leading some troops who are running away or demoralized. And as we've talked about throughout our series, the Russian Orthodoxy and religion is very important for the Russian soldier, and certainly the regimental priests would have played a crucial role in terms of morale. This monument, it deserves to be there. The regimental priests deserve to be commemorated somewhere.
It's a nice gesture to a group of the army that won't get a lot of attention,
right?
And exactly. It's also a great kind of pose. I've seen the photograph of it. It is absolutely a very striking monument where you can just imagine it being in some sort of late Tsarist film where the priest runs forward against the French and gets shot down, leading the charge.
Exactly. Actually, there is a 2008 film, I believe, called Kolchak on the Russian Civil War and on Kolchak, and that is where there's a scene where the whites are not doing very well and they're pushed back, and then all of a sudden a priest sort of holds across, then rushes into the fray, and the others sort of turn on their heels and go back into the fray, and then they overwhelm the Reds. So yeah, that definitely happens. It's a very dramatic sort of thing you can do in a movie, and it has been done on several occasions. The final site of interest. I mean, there are other sort of more minor monuments which we won't go into, but the final major site of interest is the St. Nicholas Convent, which is maybe 10-15 minutes walk to the north, maybe slightly less actually, and that's where a lot of the fierce fighting happened near the walls, and you can actually see the bullet holes still on the gates of the monastery, and you should be able to go inside and have a bit of a wander around. I believe it is still an active monastic institution. So that, I believe, is where we will end our tour of Maloyaroslavets, which, again, it's the sort of thing where you are going to have to be quite interested in in the 1812 campaign to go out there. But if you do, there is some nice stuff to see, and I think you will be impressed by the museums.